TorahCafe.com.
Welcome everyone to our class on trust, and specifically trust in God, why it's so vital and important, and the great importance and the need for all of us to overcome the challenges that we have in trusting God, for which there are many challenges that come up. And in light of this terrible pandemic that we find ourselves in the midst of, I'd like to draw an analogy from bacteria and the germ theory and viruses, because this serves as a fantastic analogy for what we are meant to do. We, as the Jewish people, are meant to bring to the world, and how trusting in God is essential to our very purpose. Because the very first form of the germ theory dates back to the 11th century. But we know that the germ theory wasn't accepted till about 700 or 800 years later, which is very fascinating. Viruses were actually only discovered at the end of the 19th century. Even though, again, there was discussion about the possibility of bacteria, of matter which did not meet the eye, which one could not see, and that being the culprit of the different illnesses and sicknesses and epidemics that killed thousands and thousands of people throughout time. And the reason is very simple. How can you trust what you can't see? How can you trust that people had theories, but they were just theories? And the sensible thinker said, this is ridiculous. I mean, how are you going to believe that you're talking about something which you can't show us, you can't demonstrate, and we're supposed to believe that that is the cause of all of the problems? But here is the reality. The reality is that these theories were correct as we know today. Even though they were not able to see it, it was there. And the reality is that they were not responding to reality. They were not responding to reality because they were dismissing what was really there. Now, that's not to anyone's fault. And it takes a lot of time to actually develop and become aware of many different things. And one can say that many scientific breakthroughs came about despite the establishment. And this is not a criticism of the establishment, because this is true in any establishment. Despite, we can say the establishment are the human beings, despite us and our limitations, our inherent limitations, we end up, thank God in these instances, discovering that there is a reality which we were completely unaware of. And so, and we find ourselves in this unusual and in certain respects horrific period where there is a virus which does not meet the eye, and yet it is having such a debilitating impact on humankind throughout the entire world, which has woken us up. How it has woken us up is a good question. And that's, I think, a personal question for every single one of us, but it has woken us up. And all of this is actually very telling to us as a Jewish people. And in some form, an analogy for us. Because what it's demonstrating is the idea that there are many things in the universe, in the physical universe, which do not meet the eye but are there. And by us being aware of and being open to the fact that they are possibly there, and then discovering that in fact that they are there, that can actually be enormously beneficial. And likewise, we as a Jewish people have a responsibility, and that is to reveal to the world something which does not meet the eye. It doesn't meet the eye not only because it is matter which is so small that we don't see it, but it's not even matter. It's spirit. And that is the job of the Jewish people, to reveal to the rest of the world that there is another and a deeper, I should say, not another, but a deeper reality to the reality as we know it. And we are never fully addressing or responding to reality unless we are truly in touch with the spirit which matter is imbued with. And in fact, the spirit is more important than the matter. And as we know, which is also relates to our current pandemic, the immune system is healthiest when a person's spirit is healthy. When a person is, and this relates directly to trust as we're going to discuss, when a person is unhealthy, when a person is in fear or full of worry, that lowers our immune system's ability to fight outside elements significantly. So we see that the spirit is actually very, very significant. And this spirit is true in anything, whether it's the spirit of a human being or the spirit of any form of matter, which God imbues with spirit, or the spirit of the universe, which is the presence of God. When we become aware of this presence, of this spirit, we are truly in touch with reality. And we, first and foremost, have this responsibility to get in touch with this. And this requires an enormous amount of trust, because it's not something that meets the eye. And so we need to develop the ability to let go of our control, let go of being in fear, and permitting ourselves to give ourselves over to a reality that we learn about, so that we begin to trust it. And as we trust it, it becomes so clear that this reality is so real. It is more real than anything else. In 1950, there was a shochet, a ritual slaughterer, a Jew who slaughters animals according to a Jewish halacha, Jewish law, so that the meat would be kosher. He had two brothers, and he had lost his father. Sadly, his father passed away. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And his question was that as a shochet, very often a shochet, a ritual slaughterer, he goes out to rural areas in order to slaughter animals. And very often there are very few Jews there, and there isn't dominion. His father just passed away, and we know that through the first 11 months after the passing of a parent, one says Kaddish every day. And he wanted to know if he can go back to his job, which was very important because he needed A, to support his family, and B, with the money he was going to make, he'd also be able to pay for his share of the costs of his father's burial. And so he wanted to know if it would be okay for him to go back to his job, although that would prevent him from being able to say Kaddish for his father. And he wrote this question to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded to him, first addressing directly his question. And the Rebbe explained how, in this instance, he has two brothers who are also sons, who will be saying Kaddish, which is even better than paying someone who's a stranger to say Kaddish. And he needs it for his livelihood, and that is a compelling enough reason, according to Jewish law, for him to be able to go back to his job. And it's also going to benefit his father's actual burial, because he'll be able to pay for his father's burial in part with the money he's going to make. So with all of these reasons, the Rebbe says that you would be permitted to go back to your job, even though you would not be able to say Kaddish. And then the Rebbe concludes the letter with just two brief lines. He says, however, all of the above I mention because I do not know where you stand in regards to your trust in God. But if your trust in God is strong and it is pure, then there is no need for you to go back to your job over there, because you can stay in a place where you can say Kaddish, and with your trust in God, you can be sure that God will provide you with the livelihood that you need to support your family and to pay for your father's funeral. This is a very inspiring letter, because it demonstrates that we choose the reality that we live in. We can either choose to live in the reality of nature, which is living in the reality of the world, as the world functions according to the natural cycles and means that God designed the world to function. But then a person can actually live in the reality, not of nature, but live in the reality of God. And when one lives in the reality of God, there are no limitations, because God is infinite. And so we are no longer confined now. We are no longer submitting ourselves to the laws of nature, which are very structured and strictly limited, but we are opening ourselves up to God. And when someone demonstrates to God, and this has to be obviously authentic, that they truly are not worried and they truly trust in God, then they are operating in the reality of God. And when one operates in the reality of God, God will, in the merit of the fact that you trust in God, which we'll discuss, God will supply you with those things that you need, which is astounding, and an astounding opportunity. However, trusting in God is not an easy thing at all. As we know, trusting another person who we can see, right, is not an easy thing at all. And while we can't compare a person to God in any way, shape, or form, because God is fully trustworthy, because God is all able, God is compassionate, God is loving, and God is good. These are all factors which are very important that we need to learn about so that we become imbued with this understanding of God, and we don't have misconceptions about what God is. And a human being is not necessarily all good, and always have good intentions, or always seek out the best for us, the other person. We still have, so to trust in God is putting our trust in the most reliable, the all reliable place. Trusting in another person or anything else is really not completely trustworthy at all. There are many flaws to putting our trust in anything other than God. However, another person, you can see that other person, but even with their best intentions, they just don't have the ability. But even where we're confident that they do have the ability, for us to let go and say, I will put myself in your hands, is something that we just find a very hard time doing. To delegate, we have an extremely difficult time doing. It is against our nature to do that. Trust is a difficult thing. And trusting in God is not any easier. And therefore, we need to develop that and work on that. I remember when I was I was teaching in a summer camp, teenagers, and the camp had recently built a rope course in the woods. And my group of students were going out to the rope course as an activity one afternoon, and I went with them. And right when we came to the rope course, the very first obstacle or step that they had in the rope course, they called, and I would say it was titled inaccurately, and I'll explain why in a moment. They called it the leap of faith. And this leap of faith was simply where you had to climb up these steps that were nailed onto a tree, and you go up maybe 2 flights, maybe not even that high, and there was a little plank of a little stand that was attached to the tree that was just big enough for your feet, and you stood on that, and you had a harness that you wore around your waist with a cable attached to your harness that went over a cable that was high up, way above you. And it went back down. That cable went back down to an anchor guy, to a guy on the floor, who also had a harness. And the other end of the cable was attached to him. And the idea was that you would jump off of this plank, and really just jumping into midair, and you would end up dangling because the anchor guy would be firmly rooted on the ground, and you would end up hanging once the cable became firm and tight. For some reason, probably so that I can share this experience, have this experience first and foremost, and then share the experience with many others. The guy running this course decided to come to me first and say, "You're going to go first." And I was terrified. So I climbed up this tree, and I'm standing on this platform, and my knuckles are white, my palms are sweating, and it literally required every bit of energy in me to go against every fiber of every part of me telling me not to jump, to get myself to jump. And thank God I had the peer pressure of all of my campers below that that gave me the extra boost to say that I need to jump. And I jumped, and I yelled, and I released energy in that moment like I never released in my life. And they call it the leap of faith because you need to have faith. But the truth is you don't need to have faith. You need to have trust. There's a very big difference between faith and trust. Faith is believing in something. Trust is living what you believe in. That means acting upon what you believe in. There's a very big difference between believing in an idea, believing in God, and then acting based on your belief in God. That means making decisions based on that. That's trust. So it was really, in a certain respect, a tremendous leap of trust. Now, over there, it wasn't trust in God. It was trust in the anchor guy on the floor below. And I knew that many other campers had done this before, in the weeks prior. And so I trusted that I was going to be okay. And even with all of that trust, I had to go against every fiber of my being in order to be able to get myself to do that. Because that's how difficult it is to trust. There was a famous tightrope walker whose name was Jean-Francois Gravelet. I'm assuming that's French. And June 30th, 1859, he thrilled an enormous crowd of people who came to watch him walk across a tightrope that was 1,100 feet long and 160 feet above Niagara Falls. And he did this without a safety harness like I was wearing when I jumped. Now, he was a big entertainer who put his life out on the line many, many times. And he crossed over Niagara Falls, I believe, many, many times he did that walk. And one time he did the walk, and then he asked everyone, "Should I go blindfolded? Should I go blindfolded?" And of course the crowd cheered him on. Sure, go blindfolded. And he went blindfolded across. Then he said, "Should I go blindfolded with a wheelbarrow? Pushing a wheelbarrow?" They said, yeah, do it. They all applauded him, and he walked across blindfolded with a wheelbarrow. And then he said, "Now I would like to walk across blindfolded with a wheelbarrow and someone in it. Who would like to come into the wheelbarrow?" Now, how many people do you think raised their hand? Absolutely none. Because it's wonderful to watch him and trust that he's going to get across. Or have faith, I should say, that he's going to get across. But for me to go into that wheelbarrow, I need to trust. That is what we are talking about. We are talking about truly trusting God when things are at stake. That's trusting. But when I trust God, I trust. And I don't have anything to worry about. The experience that we are going through now, right? Where people, where our finances, for many, many, many people have been shaken, right? That instills fear in our hearts. What am I going to do next month or in 3 months? That's a serious, serious question. But we can either have fear or we can have trust. We can either have fear or we can have trust. That is our choice. But we have to learn to develop trust, which we're not going to be able to do now in our short period of time. But I am hoping to inspire you to go down the journey of developing trust, because it's the biggest gift we can give ourselves. And if you want to be a powerful person, the most powerful people are people who trust in God. Because we don't walk through life then in fear. The benefits of trusting God is that we have tranquility in our life. We have peace. We are happy. We don't worry. We're not concerned. We're calm. All of the things that people seek in their entire life. Right? Very often, what's the reason why we pursue more and more money? Because we believe it's going to give us security. The only person who truly has security in the world is someone who trusts in God. They walk around secure, without the money, with the money, without the money. But they walk around secure. They're not dependent on anything. They only depend on one thing. And that one entity, which is the only reliable entity in the world. And as our current situation demonstrates to us, a person could have been very secure a month ago, and today is in a very insecure place. This is not, and obviously, this is true for health as well, right? Where suddenly, God forbid, and it's horrific for us to see. It's actually terrifying to see before our own eyes people that we know, people who are dear to us, who suddenly were always healthy. They get stricken. The only antidote to this is trusting in God, what we call bitachon. And the only other option is not trusting in God, which is our natural disposition, if you will, to a large extent. It's a natural disposition to us as normal human beings, even though there is a part of us, which is our divine soul, which by nature trusts God. But unfortunately, our natural self sort of covers over and quiets that voice within us. And what we want to do is get in touch with that voice and liberate it from the confines of our fears and our worry and our insistence in controlling the many, many things that we know and we are being shown now more than ever are not in our control. They are entirely in the control of God. So, I can believe that what I experience in life is from God. I can believe that God can help me. But what I need to do is I need to trust that God will help me. And similar to what the Rebbe told this individual regarding his job and being able to say Kaddish or not, when a person trusts in God, God says, then I will be your security. There's a fascinating verse that the prophet Jeremiah writes, which we say in our prayers. Baruch hagever asher yiftach ba'Hashem v'haya Hashem yiftacheh. Blessed is the man who will trust in God, and God will be his security. God will be trustworthy. God says, I need you to liberate your divine self from your natural self. Because I need you, your job is to reveal to the world that there is a spiritual reality, which is the reality of God. And when you do that, I will be your benefactor. I will actually be trustworthy. People very often say, I'll trust you when you demonstrate that you're trustworthy. I'd like to ask you a question. If someone demonstrates that they're trustworthy, do you need to trust them? No, they've already proven themselves. The whole idea of trust is the insecurity, but you're feeling secure because you trust. That is, your entire security is coming from the fact that you can trust. There is no guarantee. So God says, you're filled with worries. I want to see you trust me more and more and more. And the more you trust me, the more trustworthy I become. That's a natural equation. And it's true with people as well. When we demonstrate to our child that we're going to let them do this, and we're going to trust that they're going to figure it out, we actually build up their self-esteem that way. We actually make them more trustworthy. They can in fact become much more developed. And if we don't trust them, we actually shut down their self-esteem. The abilities that God endowed them with, we now teach, we now demonstrate to them, no, you can't, let me show you how. And we actually shut down the trustworthiness. This is the equation that God created when he created the world. I put my trust in God, and God is there for me. That is the greatest merit to demonstrate. So it's a catch-22. A guy says, well, how do I know if God's going to help? And the answer is, you have to trust that God's going to help. That is the whole concept. The whole concept is trusting that God's going to help. And this is the reason why the Rebbe counseled an endless number of people. Literally an endless number of people. So many people the Rebbe told. You need to stop worrying and you need to study. Chayves Halvavis, which is a book called Duties of the Heart. Chapter 4, the title of chapter 4 is Sha'ar HaBitachon, the Gate of Trust. And review it numerous times. And the reason why is because a person can't wake up one day and just believe, or I should say, can't wake up one day and just trust in God. We need to study about God. We need to learn about the attributes of God. We need to become aware of the fact that God loves us abundantly. That God cares about us. That God seeks out our good. These are very deep, profound concepts that we need to think about and we need to study. And when we know that, then we know God is, as is explained in the Gate of Trust, that God is the only entity in the universe that has the attributes needed for one to be able to put their trust in them. God loves me. God is all able. God cares for me. God seeks out my goodness. Human beings are so limited. Again, as we see in our time right now, how so many people who maybe we would have put our trust in, a month ago in different areas for different people, and suddenly we see we're all vulnerable. We're all vulnerable because there's only one all-able being. So people ask, how can I trust a God who isn't there for me? This is a major question. And I'm going to answer it very simply. And I'm going to say that to fully answer this question, one must study the Gate of Trust. But I'm just going to answer simply, how can I trust a God who isn't there for me? The answer is, you can't trust a God who isn't there for you. And if you have a God who isn't there for you, that isn't God. What do you mean? Do you know what has happened in my life? You know what challenges I deal with and what I suffer from? That's an obvious question that any one of us can say. All of us on different levels. But no one's life is a smooth life. Everyone's life it deals with challenges. And God is always there for me. As the Rebbe once told someone, that the difference between faith and trust, faith is believing in God, or believing that something is from God, but trust is that the problem God gave me isn't a problem. The problem God gave me is a challenge that God gave for me, because I can benefit from that in some way. There are many, many different ways, as he discusses in the Gate of Trust. There are many, many different ways that we benefit, even though it's very unpleasant. And we still pray to God to give us only things which are pleasant in a very revealed way, on all levels of our experience in this world. However, at the end of the day, God is always there for me, and God does everything for my good, even though it's not always experienced that way. Now, this is something that a person can easily just dismiss. And I would say this, just on a very practical level. Do we want to go through the rest of our life scared and full of worry? Or are we willing to entertain another option, which has stood by the Jewish people for 3,300 years, or since Abraham's time? It's about 3,700 years. Stood by our people for 3,700 years. Of people trusting in God, having tranquility, calm, and peace. Those are the options. And that's what we have to ask ourselves, which one we want to choose. And by going through this journey of studying the Gate of Trust, and beginning to put our trust in God more and more, which is itself an infinite journey, we will begin to reap the benefits of it. And every little bit we reap will encourage us to take another step further. To be honest, for many years I didn't struggle with trust in God. And what I mean by that is, I just took, quote unquote, control of my own life. I took care of things for myself. But of course, it's only a matter of time till we realize that there's so much that we cannot take care of. And the fact that I didn't struggle with trust was because I simply wasn't engaged in it. And then I started to struggle with trust. And I expect, without any doubt, that I will be struggling with my trust in God for the rest of my life. And I pray that I do, because if I'm struggling, I know that I'm trusting to some extent, and I'm fighting to trust more. And that brings me closer to God. That reveals to the rest of the universe the reality of God in this world, as people will watch me and encounter me. And through thereby I am bringing and fulfilling the purpose God put me here. And all of us can do that. And the benefit of that is that I am more tranquil, I am calmer, I'm more at peace, I worry less. This opportunity, this situation that we're in right now, I see as there are a number of tremendous opportunities for me personally. We all have to find those opportunities for ourselves, because they are truly opportunities God is giving us, and we need to be able to see that. And part of the opportunity for me is letting go of different things that I worry about, and knowing that God is carrying me on His wings. As the Rebbe told many, many people, and as it's written in the Gate of Trust, if God manages to find a way to feed the millions of birds flying throughout the universe, and God will manage to find a way, and for God it's not managing, of course, but God will find a way to make sure that we all have the livelihood we need to feed ourselves and our families as well. So I want to conclude with one final story. That's a story with a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Avraham Rottenberg. Rabbi Rottenberg, he was born in Germany in the 1930s. Thank God his parents were able to get out of Germany and go to Israel before the war broke out. And that's where he was raised. He ended up in the 1950s in America as a rabbi, teaching in a yeshiva in New York. And he developed a relationship with the Rebbe. And in 1958, his family was in Israel. He was here married in America. And he received a letter from his brother that their father had a heart attack. Now, in those days, by the time a letter was sent from Israel and came to America, it was at least a week. So he knew his father had a heart attack a week ago. He has no idea what condition his father is in. And he was gripped with fear. So he went running to 770, to the Rebbe, and to tell the Rebbe. And he wrote in the letter he wrote to submit to the Rebbe, to inform the Rebbe of what was going on. He wrote, "I don't even know what to think at this point." That's what he wrote, right? Natural, right? We can all see ourselves writing that, I would assume, right? Like, we're so shaken and in such fear of the fact that, God forbid, a parent had a heart attack, and you don't even know their state now. It's a week later. And in those days, to make a call from America to Israel, or vice versa, was a major, major thing, which is hard for us to relate to nowadays with our cell phones. So the Rebbe underlined those words, "I don't even know what to think at this point." The Rebbe underlined them, and he wrote next to it a Hebrew word, mavhil. Mavhil with 3 exclamation points, which means shocking. Shocking. It's shocking that you write that you don't even know what to think at this point. That's what the Rebbe was telling him. And then the Rebbe wrote, "Tracht gut wird sein gut." Think good and it will be good. And the Rebbe was telling him the meaning of think good and will be good is not positive thinking, but the meaning of think good and will be good is trust that God loves you and loves your father and will do good for him and take care of him and do what is best for him. and then it will be good. But you need to trust. And that's what the saying is. Tracht gut. If you are trusting that it will be good, wird sein gut, then it will be good. But there needs to be the trust first. Now, immediately when he got this from the Rebbe, getting it from a great man of God like the Rebbe, it calmed him down immediately. And a couple of days later, he made the effort to call Israel, and he called, and his mother picked up, and his mother said that thank God, since Thursday night, your father's condition has stabilized, and thank God he's on his way to recovery. So this Rabbi Rottenberg went back to the Rebbe to inform the Rebbe of the good news. He dropped the worry, the concern on the Rebbe's desk, and now he wanted to tell the Rebbe that his father was doing well. So when he saw the Rebbe, he told the Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, my father is doing better. So the Rebbe said, when did he start doing better? So he told him Thursday night. And then the Rebbe said, and when did you start thinking good? Which was really right after the Rebbe had told him. It was Thursday night. And he understood that the Rebbe was pointing out to him, when did your father start improving? The moment you started trusting. And then the Rebbe said, may such a thing never happen again, but you must remember to think good. And this is what I leave you with, and I leave myself with, that we need to develop our trust in the infinite source of all goodness, Almighty God, which is a lifelong struggle. But we can do it in increments. And we do that through staying plugged into the subject of God, what God is, and the subject of trusting in God. And the best way to do that, as the Rebbe encouraged an endless number of people, is by studying the gate of trust. Study it over and over. And I will tell you that I began giving classes as well, which are posted on YouTube, on the gate of trust, because as this whole situation evolved, I realized that it's about time that I studied the gate of trust. And I will tell you firsthand that as I just learned the ideas, my trust in God has definitely improved in small measure, and thereby it impacts our lives and the lives of anyone that we get in touch with. Tremendous success to you and to all of us in our trust in God.